Hello and welcome to the first episode of Brad Books. My name is Brad Gaddy, and today we're going to be taking a literary run through The Maze Runner by James Dashner. So here's the story. Thomas wakes up with his memory wiped to find himself inside of a black elevator-like box. He can only remember his name and other very basic things. The box takes him to a place called the Glade. The Glade is a very small village surrounded by a giant maze that goes on for miles. The Glade is full of adolescent boys between the ages of about 12 and 18 named Gladers who also don't have any past memories. The Glade is ran by two leaders, Newt and Albie. Another Glader named Chuck is assigned to help get Thomas familiarized with the Glade. Gladers work different jobs to make sure that everything stays in order. Thomas doesn't know why, but he feels called to be a runner, or someone who explores the maze looking for a way out. This desire is unusual because the maze is extremely dangerous and runners risk getting stuck inside of the maze every night when the doors close. No one has ever survived staying in the maze after the doors close because the grievers come out at night. Grievers are slug-like monsters that are part machine, part flesh. Shortly after Thomas arrives in the Glade, a girl shows up. This scares the Gladers for multiple reasons. A girl has never came to the Glade before. She's also in a coma, and she's holding a note that says she's the last person coming to the Glade. A few days later, Albie and a runner named Minho get stuck in the maze and Thomas rushes in to save them, even though it's against the rules. Thomas rescues them, becoming the first person to survive a night in the maze. While in the maze, Albie gets stung by one of the Grievers, and Thomas and Minho also find something that is later revealed to be the Griever hole. Through saving Albie and Minho, Thomas proves to the Gladers that he can handle being a runner, but he still has to spend a night in the slammer for breaking the rules of the Glade. Chuck visits Thomas in jail, and Thomas promises that he will reunite Chuck with his mom someday. The next thing you know, the power is out in the Glade because the girl has triggered the ending. The sun is out and the Gladers won't be getting any more food or supplies. The doors also won't be closing at night anymore, so now the Grievers can come into the Glade whenever they want. After the power goes out, Teresa wakes up and tells Thomas that the maze is a code. Thomas uses maps of the maze to reveal hidden words, but he doesn't know what the words mean. Time is running out for the Gladers, and Thomas decides to intentionally get stung by a Griever in order to use the extra information to find out how to leave the maze. The sting reveals to Thomas that the way out is through the Griever hole, where he will be able to use the code words to get out of the maze. The Gladers decide to gather all the weapons that they can and go out into the maze and fight the Grievers in an attempt to escape. Albie tries to sacrifice himself because the Grievers have only been killing one Glader a night. But this time it's different and his sacrifice fails. A battle ensues, and after it is over, only 21 Gladers are still alive. The Gladers leave the maze and find the creators who have been watching them all along. A Glader named Gally, who everyone thought was dead, is with the creators. Gally throws a knife at Thomas, but Chuck gets in the way. Chuck dies in Thomas's arms. Before Thomas can hardly even begin to grieve, a group of people rush in and save the Gladers from the creators. The Gladers are safer now, but it won't be long before they have to face more danger. So let's break things down a bit. The maze, the Glade, the Gladers, and the Grievers are all facets that create an overarching coming-of-age story within the Maze Runner. The Gladers are symbolic for all young boys having to eventually face the challenges and realities of the adult world. Transitioning period for the Gladers by providing temporary safety, but after a while, the Gladers will all have to face the maze. Facing the maze is difficult because when it comes down to it, no one knows how to do it. Newt and Albie may be the leaders, but at the end of the day, they are just as confused as everybody else is. The maze represents the struggle that inevitably happens during the transition into adulthood. Whenever a Glader gets stung by a Griever, they have to go through a torturous process that exposes them to painful memories and sad realities. This is symbolic of the loss of innocence that anybody could experience at any time in their life. The Maze Runner also heavily challenges the motif of death that often appears in film and literature. Death is often portrayed as something that can be overcome if confronted with honor, courage, bravery, and other noble qualities. In the Maze Runner, death doesn't work this way. Death is unpredictable and comes at the worst times. Attempting to do something noble, Albie sacrifices himself to the Grievers in front of all the other Gladers. But he ends up dying for nothing, demoralizing all of the Gladers who are about to fight the monsters that just killed him. Chuck's death is also important to look at. Chuck was more content than most of the other boys to stay in the Glade. He's young and innocent and doesn't question where his food and electricity comes from. He doesn't do anything considered brave until the end of the novel when he leaves the Glade, and he has to end up paying for this with his life. Chuck's death also shows how helpless the Gladers really are and how bad Wicked really is. After escaping the maze, the Gladers are still at the mercy of Wicked. Their efforts to escape are futile because someone else is still controlling how their lives will turn out. Another thing that's important about the Maze Runner is to see that the good guys aren't always good. When Ben is banished from the Glade, he is treated like an animal. He's forced to wear a collar as the keepers together push him out of the Glade with a metal rod. The Gladers are focused on the greater good of the Glade and think it will be safer without Ben. All of the leaders push Ben out at the same time and even try to make Ben face the opposite way so the Gladers won't have to see his face as he's banished. A similar occurrence happens at the end of the book when the Gladers decide to battle the Grievers. A lot of the Gladers that go to fight the Grievers are only leaving because they believe that only one Glader will have to be sacrificed. The irony of all this is that Wicked seems to be doing the exact same things. The boys were sent into the glade because Wicket had decided that it benefited the greater good of society. The problem with groups working towards the greater good is the lack of responsibility that arises. When Wicket is acting as an organization, no individuals have to be responsible for forcing a group of boys to live inside of a deadly maze. In the same way, the keepers as a group are able to banish Ben to death in the maze because no individual is ever going to have to take full responsibility for killing him. Wicket is obviously horrible and not good at all, but the Gladers have shown quite a few of the same characteristics, and they aren't exactly innocent. At this point, the Gladers may not be evil like the group Wicket is, but as the saying goes, the road that leads to the gates of Hades is often paved with good intentions. This brings up the old question of, how does somebody keep from becoming the very thing that they wish to defeat? Examples of this struggle can be seen between characters like Batman and the Joker, and Anakin eventually becoming Darth Vader. There comes a point when all of us as individuals have to acknowledge that boundaries exist between what's right for the greater good and what's actually right for everyone. Because if precautions aren't taken, bad things are sure to happen, and pretty soon you're left with a lot of dead 12-year-old boys. That does it for this episode of Brad Books. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and share. More videos are on the way. If you have more to say about the Maze Runner or have suggestions for future videos, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Thanks for watching.